Hey folks, so today is August 22nd, 2018, and it's the 100-year anniversary of the publication of a document. This one I've got right here, the Letter to the American Workers, written by Vladimir Lenin. This was in 1918, August 22nd, just after the Russian Revolution. The leader of the Bolsheviks decided to write a letter to the people of the United States of America, the workers. I'm going to read to you a few key passages from this letter. He writes, "The history of modern civilized America opened with one of those great, really liberating, really revolutionary wars, of which there have been so few compared to the vast numbers of wars of conquest, like the present imperialist war, that were caused by squabbles among kings, landowners, capitalists over the division of usurped lands or ill-gotten gains." He writes, "That was the war the American people waged against the British robbers who oppressed America and held her in colonial slavery, the same way these civilized bloodsuckers are still oppressing and holding people in colonial slavery, hundreds of millions of people in India, Egypt, and all parts of the world." He's hailing the American Revolution against the British Empire back in 1776, saying it was a great step forward. He then goes on and says the American people, who set the world an example in waging a revolutionary war against feudal slavery, now find themselves in the latest capitalist stage of wage slavery to a handful of multimillionaires, and find themselves playing the role of hired thugs who will benefit of the wealthy scoundrels, throttling the Philippines in 1898 under the pretext of liberating them, and throttling the Russian Socialist Republic in 1918 under the pretext of protecting it from the Germans. So he's talking about the American working people. He's hailing the Civil War as a great example. He goes on to say, "The American people have a revolutionary tradition which has been adopted by the best representatives of the American proletariat, who have repeatedly expressed their complete solidarity with us, the Bolsheviks. That tradition is the War of Liberation against the British in the 18th century and the Civil War in the 19th century. And from there, he even goes on to say, the American workers will not follow the bourgeoisie. They will be with us for the Civil War against the bourgeoisie. The whole history of the world and of the American labor movement speaks my conviction. That is so." He goes on to then quote Eugene Debs, saying he would rather be shot than vote for credits for the criminal and reactionary war. Then Eugene Debs goes on to say, he knows of only one holy and from the proletarian standpoint legitimate war, namely the war against the capitalists to liberate mankind from wage slavery. Quite bold stuff. And then he goes on to answer. At the time, the American press was playing up the idea that the Bolsheviks were, mass murderers and were engaging in mass terror and killing people. He says, "Let the corrupt bourgeois press shout to the whole world about every mistake we make in our revolution. We are not daunted by our mistakes. People have not become saints because the revolution has begun. The toiling classes who for centuries have been oppressed, downtrodden, and forcibly held in the vice of poverty, brutality, and ignorance cannot avoid making mistakes when they're making a revolution." From there, he says, "Every mistake committed in the course of such work, in the course of this most conscientious and earnest work of tens of millions of simple workers and peasants and reorganizing their whole life, every such mistake is worth 1,000 and million lawless successes achieved by the exploiting minority, successes in swindling and duping the working people. It is only through such mistakes that the workers and the peasants will learn to build a new life and learn to do without capitalists. Only in this way can they hack for themselves through the thousands of obstacles toward victorious socialism." And from there, he says, "We know that you will probably not come soon, comrade American workers, for the revolution is developing in different countries in different forms and at different tempos. It cannot be otherwise." It's quite a letter, and if you read it, he talks about the treaty they had signed with the Germans, but all through it, glowing through it, is this love for the American people. He talks about the American Revolution like it's this beautiful, glorious event. He talks about the Civil War to abolish slavery like it's this beautiful event. He never speaks with contempt for ordinary people. He seems to believe, he says that a revolutionary energy, a revolutionary spirit flows from the American people. He speaks with just love for America's working people, and it's this belief that they're not going to be loyal to the multimillionaires and billionaires that are leading them, but instead they're going to rise up and fight against capitalism just like the Russians are doing. This was a very, very different approach. On the left today, You know, if you wave an American flag, if you say that the American people are a good people and they have a progressive history, if you talk about the history of the struggle to abolish slavery, if you talk about, you know, the history of labor struggles for workers' rights and all of that, if you talk about any good things in the history of the United States, people don't take kindly to it. You know, I've had people say that the American flag is the same as the Nazi flag. That's not how Lenin saw it. According to Vladimir Lenin, 100 years ago, right after the Russian Revolution, when he wrote this document, the American people indeed have a revolutionary history, and that socialism and rising up and seizing control of the major industries and planning the economy will be for the benefit of the American people, and that these wars, this imperialism, the slaughter of people around the world, this isn't what benefits the people of the United States. It's not what the American people want. There is indeed a revolutionary side to the people of the United States of America. That's what Lenin said when speaking to the American workers. He didn't tell them to go screw themselves. He didn't say the American workers are worthless. He didn't say that they are all fascists and deserve to die. He didn't say that they all deserve to be ashamed because of their white privilege. Lenin instead hailed the progressive side of the American people and appealed to them in 1917. I wish that the leftists of today, the people that believe in revolutionary politics, would read how Lenin spoke to the American people back in 1918. When he wrote this letter 100 years ago, because it showed a very, very different approach in dealing with people. Lenin did not believe that the American people were his enemies. He believed that Wall Street and the billionaires, that he believed they were the enemy, but at no point did he believe that there should be hatred for average, ordinary, working-class people in the United States.